Welcome to the Face-Off. So glad to have everyone join today. We're going to go ahead and start. We started the live stream on YouTube. And let's get our audience in here. Okay, well, welcome to the Face-Off. I'm Caroline Meyer from Get Travel Solutions. Here today, we have Susan Lichtenstein from DigiTravel Consulting, Bernadette Leahy from Extend Digital Pay, and Megan Dressel from Keller North America. And today, we're here to break down the topic of digital payments versus corporate card. So to get things kicked off, we'd like to start off with just a general question, which is, what is the difference between a digital payment and a corporate card? Bernadette?
So thank you for asking. A digital card is a 16-digit number. It has a funding source that's a real card. It has a CVC number, and it has an expiration date. But the issuer of the card or the program manager can set an expiration date for whatever they want, if it's a week away or 30 days or a year, depending on the purpose of the card. It can be generated in seconds, and it can be updated or canceled immediately when it's no longer needed. And they can be used to make invoice payments, they can cover business expenses, and they can be used to be reconciled against AP. I think more frequency, 71% of virtual cards today are used for B2B payments, but now that travel is starting to make a comeback, I think we're going to see a lot more use with travel.
Great. Megan, what are your thoughts? What's the difference between virtual card and a corporate card and digital payment?
So Bernadette's not wrong, but let me make this a little simpler for everybody. A digital card is any time you don't have to pull this out of your wallet.
All right.
Right? Plastic is plastic. Everybody's got plastic. It's hard to deal with. You have a lot of people out there who you don't want to give a card to. Perhaps they are uncomfortable carrying one. You want something that's more secure. That's when digital payments come into play.
Very cool.
So how do you expense a digital payment versus a credit card? So we know there are multiple systems out there in the world that, with either very simple ways to expense or very difficult ways to expense. But what are the benefits between the two of them? So how does that work in a reconciliation process, let's say, for the travel leaders?
So it all depends what you're doing with your card program. For my program, we're running with a company that's relatively new to managing travel. So we're building systems still. We do digital payments. We have the capability to do digital payments for airline and for hotel. When we do them for air, we push those transactions down to the expense report. And we let the user reconcile them. For our hotel program payments, when they make the reservation, they provide their coding information to the agency, and then the agency stores that with the card record so that it comes out in our reconciliation at the end.
Okay, great.
And I'd say, just if I could answer that from our part, with virtual cards, every transaction that's occurring on Extend or with any virtual card is captured in the background. So it's automatically available immediately as soon as it's issued real time. You can see when it's been authed or declined. And the transaction itself is stored. And then the travelers or the employees can just either upload a digital receipt or take a picture of the receipt and attach it in Extend to the transaction it's associated with.
Okay. And Susan, you talked a little bit about, eliminating the expense report. So we're hearing a lot about, these people, different suppliers coming out with these solutions and telling us, if you use a virtual payment, you can use it for everything and you don't even need an expense report. Susan, are your clients saying the same thing to you?
So I think it's really exciting what we see now, right? Yesterday, we saw an announcement by Microsoft, right? And the week Focusrite put out an article yesterday about hotels are just chasing very hard with their new partner direct bookings, right? And so you see a lot of articles saying one way or the other. And now we see collaboration travel is becoming one of the largest segments of travel because everybody moved during COVID. It's like, okay, I'm leaving this city and going to another one, right? With a big house and a backyard, and I don't want to be alone with my, myself anymore. Those kind of things were happening. So what do you do with that traveler that's never traveled before, that doesn't know how to fill out expense report, that we don't want to give a credit card to, right? It's not necessary for 1 or 2 trips a year. So is it possible to have a corporate program that encompasses different payment programs, right? Different ways of handling things, kind of like multiple channels to book. Is it possible to have a corporate program with multiple channels to pay into one expense system?
Yeah.
And I think the short answer is, yeah, you can have multiple channels to pay. But the concept of no expense report doesn't work for us. And I think it doesn't work for a lot of corporates out there. Anyone who bills the government, bills a client, or has to file tax returns, allows their people to buy non-travel on the card, has to have a receipt attached to that. You don't get it if you don't have an expense report.
Susan, I'm in sales, so I try not to. I'm sorry, Megan. I was just going to say, I'm the person who like waits 2 weeks to do my expense reports. But I will say that one thing that I'm experiencing here is that the minute I make a transaction, it's showing up on my phone, it's showing up on an email, the notification is going to the travel manager. So I'm always like, do we really need to do an expense report? Because it's already in the system. But I think it's just really to Megan's point about like government and requirements and taxes, especially the nature of the spend. But I think, Susan, like, if you look at kind of the integrations that are occurring between we have plastic and virtual card transactions pooled together and pushing or combining to AP and ERP systems. So there is a place for both worlds now.
So I'm going to follow Carolyn real quick. I'm the queen of saying, own the payment, own the program. And the reason I say that is, look at things like Trip Actions and Liquid, right? And now Spotnan is out there as a marketplace, right? And so when I listen to these different companies saying, hey, you can book any way you want to, and all of your suppliers will live in this great marketplace, and all of your suppliers will have better discounts and packages, and this nirvana, this future, what Johnny would call Traveltopia world is upon us. Woohoo! I'm so excited. And then I think, okay, but what's going to be the steady piece that people use to manage their travel? And to me, the logical choice seems to be the payment, which is why I asked, can we use different payments? So to your point, Megan, you mentioned, we need an expense report. Okay, great. But how do you deliver that information to the expense report? I think is going to be key. And who pays for this is going to be key. So tell me what you think about, with all the booking channels in the world, and now Generation Z going boop, 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 or talking into their phone, or whatever we need them to do to go faster. And now maybe in the mega universe even, right? NFTs are going to happen in travel soon, right? What a better industry than to have NFTs in travel. It's the perfect industry, right? So how is that going to affect own the payment, own the program? Because that may be the only way to track what you're doing, right? So what do you guys think about that?
I think it's two pieces. I think owning the payment and owning the expense process are how you get an understanding what your program is actually doing. There are so many channels out there, and it doesn't matter whether you mandate or not, there will always be use of off channel. I mean, you'll never get a rideshare provider into a booking tool. You'll never get lots of the pieces that are critical to the travel process into your booking tool. It just doesn't make sense to try to control those. So you have to know how they're paying. And I agree, it makes sense to have multi forms of payment. Maybe you want to put your airfare on a ghost account. Maybe you want to issue a virtual card, a limited one-time use card for a traveler who is a candidate, maybe a new hire, someone who's not going to be regularly traveling. But all that needs to come back into an expense platform. You need to capture receipts. You need to fulfill your fiduciary responsibilities. You can't do that without the back end closure on it.
Great.
The only thing I would add there is industry. Oh, sorry, Susan.
What are you seeing in your industry about owning the payment, owning the program?
I think that's a great. I think for me, I look at virtual cards, and you can create a unique virtual card for every single supplier. So when you talk about Uber and Lyft, it's on the mobile phone or it's in the profile of Uber and Lyft. So we're able to track, I think, a lot more where everybody is and how they're using the cards. And you can create unique virtual cards for every single circumstance and every single supplier, so that if there's fraud or there's control issues, you can turn the card off immediately. So I do think we're learning a lot from the spend across our customer base. And to Megan's point, like, people are always going to be doing what they want, like using their own travel management company, booking or going off-site. But for the most part, I'm finding a greater degree of compliance with our corporations with virtual cards, because they love them because of the consumer experience of either their desktop or their mobile or their Apple Wallet. So I think
it's great as long as your employees carry phones.
Right, that's a good
mine
point.
Don't.
Good point.
Yeah,
mine don't.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So if you don't have a mobile phone, that's an issue. And in her case, she happens to have travelers who are part of crew, and many of them don't have mobile phones, and it's done differently. So yeah, that's very interesting. I think you were trying to ask a question, Susan. We were moving on to the next one. Otherwise, I'll go back.
Nope, go right ahead. I think we have some questions online too.
Okay. Before I answer the question online, I just wanted to ask a question because we actually do have a buyer on the line, which is Megan, right? So we normally would ask in this face-off how does the buyer view this? How they view this topic? So the digital payments versus corporate card. And I don't know, Megan, if you can speak kind of like more in generality from a procurement buyer standpoint, not necessarily just at Keller, but kind of more of a high level.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of virtual cards is not new in the industry. I had it pitched to me back in, I don't know, 2005 when I was in Chicago. I discussed it in a job interview in 2011.
Right.
It's not a new thing, but it's still not fully mature yet. The concept is great. No argument. I love the concept. The concept gives you better security. It gives you a form of payment that you can deploy instantly. But I think, speaking as a buyer, there are scenarios where it just doesn't work, either doesn't work yet or doesn't work at all. You know, I have people who don't carry smartphones. Large portion of my workforce are crew level employees. They travel. They have to get on a plane. They have to rent a car. They have to show up at a job site, check into a hotel, and eat while they're there. But they don't carry a smartphone. They don't have any way to deploy that virtual card. We can V-card for them when they're checking into a hotel, if the hotel understands how to handle it. And let's be real, folks, they're still not there yet. 15, 20 years into this capability. Some hotels get it, other ones don't. And the staffing turnover as a result of COVID has really taken the learning curve back a long ways. So it's a great concept. It's something I think it's worth doing, but you have to think about where you're going to deploy it and make sure that where you're putting it makes sense for how your business is going to use it.
That makes sense.
I guess I would the only thing I would add is, out of curiosity, people even in the audience, that I remember the days when I used to have to carry like my BlackBerry, which was my work issued phone, and then my personal phone. But our cards or virtual cards are tied to an email address. So anywhere someone can access their email address, they have access to the full card number, the CVC, the expiration date. I agree that people need plastic, like road warriors need plastic. But on the other hand, if someone lost their plastic, which happens a lot, you can literally send a card to a stranded employee within seconds. And also the days where a company has to decide who gets plastic and their minimum credit line is $15,000 and their maximum is $30,000, and you don't want people out there carrying that. So I do see that virtual cards are solving the need for specific uses of a card, whether it's one time or it's a multi-use, or we have a lot of success with recurring billing and subscriptions and things like that. So like the payments, when COVID came, we found our success through the shifting of B2B payments. People couldn't make payments from their home offices. But the industry, regardless, is going to grow up to, I think it's 5 trillion by 2025. So it's not going away. I think it's just a matter of the merchants upgrading their point of sale. You're still discovering people who can take tap and go and things like that. But I think it's gonna continue to find use every day for the end use cardholders.
Okay. I have a couple of questions from the audience.
Really good questions. Yeah.
All right. I'll start with the first one. This is from Pedro, and he's asking, how do you manage virtual card payments for international travelers? Please provide a scenario where a U.S. traveler goes to a conference in Australia once a year, relying on a virtual card. Will it work for business meals, taxi, hotel, etc.? Megan or Bernadette?
I'm going to take that one, Bernadette, because it doesn't work for my travelers.
Go ahead.
Hi, Pedro. How you doing? So I think really, in our case, our scenario, our virtual cards, we're actually expanding outside of the U.S. now. We're starting to work with Australia, as a matter of fact, and the U.K. But if you have a card and it's on your phone outside the U.S., usually it's more frequent that you can use tap and pay because the point of sales are more sophisticated. I don't know if I would leave someone out there without plastic if they were in a situation or a country that wasn't safe, but I have to say, we have an organization right now, it's a relief organization that is working with the people in the Ukraine, and they're in Poland and they're in Romania, and they're actually all using their phones and virtual cards, and it's just amazing to watch. But they have had some glitches because it's like moving the phone into their digital wallet. What their glitch they ran into is that the issuing bank actually was identifying that as an unsafe territory, so they weren't approving the charges. So that's what the root was at the end. So I guess, Pedro, I think I envision that in a world that virtual cards will be able to use much more primarily because mobile wallets and cards in phones are common. But our card is tied to an email. So wherever you have an email address, you can get access to your card on your desktop, or you can add the card number to the profile for the supplier that you're using it with, like a Starbucks or the hotel itself.
But Bernadette, what happens when you need to get in a taxi cab? Doesn't matter if you've got a card in your email with a number. You can't read that to the driver and
Yeah,
have them punch it
I
in
guess,
for you.
yeah, to your point, like I was in a taxi last night and from coming to the hotel, and the guy said, we're the only ones who have tap and pay of all the taxis in Las Vegas. So yeah, you end up having to use like plastic, or I have to say sometimes the card is on an app, right? So if it's not in the digital wallet, you can also see the full card number in the phone. And I've actually gone to restaurants where they don't have that, and I'll actually, instead of handing them plastic and having them walk off with my card, I'll go to the desk and show them the full card number with the CVC, and they just key it in. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to solve 100% of the time. I mean, I probably always wanted maybe a piece of plastic for now if I was going to an area where I wasn't 100% sure.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask a question. MasterCard, Visa, and I think, Megan, this is more you than Bernadette, because we were talking about expense reports, but MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and by the way, I'm a huge fan of these programs, and they're all plastic cards. I'm sure they're offering their own digital solutions as well, but they have a new way to eliminate 90% of what we're talking about with your expense reporting. And it's like kind of like this secret, which is kind of weird, right? And companies are doing it, where you can go and sign up with this new program and they will reconcile for you as it goes. So you have kind of rules in place, you know what your company allows and it doesn't allow. And then then the people send their receipts digitally, right? Not hard copies, directly to them. You pay as it comes, right? Every month, every quarter, whatever you pay your credit card stuff. And they do it post at times, and then, work it all through, because it's less than 1% that doesn't work out, right? So why pay all these fees and late fees and things like that? And it really does eliminate that cumbersome credit card expense process. What do you think? Have you heard about these with the people you
I've heard a little bit about them. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at them. My understanding, though, what I think you're describing, Susan, is just moving the expense report someplace else. You're taking it off your employees' shoulders, which maybe is the goal. It's not a bad thing, but it just means somebody else is doing the expense report. Somebody else is coding it. Somebody else is collecting the receipts. The nice thing about it is you get somebody else who's chasing your employees when they don't turn the receipts in. But at the end of the day, it's still an expense report.
Yeah. So it's kind of like outsourcing that process and making it much more virtual, much more digital, without adding a third party in the middle to have to manage that for you, right? Like right now we have a lot of companies that are that third party. It's kind of going directly to them now instead. So yeah, I was just wondering what you thought about that removal of that layer one more time, just trying to get rid of those layers as you go.
And we have a couple more questions from the audience. I'll start with one. This is more on the fundamentals. So like, what about situations when the vendor wants to see the actual card? We still run into that. And that's coming from Lisa Simpson. So I think what she means is, I think, Lisa, you mean like, hey, I arrived at the hotel and they're like, show us your card. You don't have one, everyone's
passport
confused.
And major credit card. Yeah.
Okay, so she's saying she's still running into that. So is that still happening today, Bernadette and Megan?
I think it is. If you don't have a membership with a hotel, I recently stayed at a Hilton in New York, and they actually finally switched over to tap and pay, but they didn't have it before. But I'm a Hilton Honors member, so I have the card on file, so they just always charge the card. But if you were going someplace like Lisa, maybe doesn't stay up frequently, and the card isn't, you could either, if they won't accept the card that's in your mobile phone, the digits in the CVC, or you didn't give it to them ahead of time, then it could be a problem. I checked in here and I just put my virtual card online, and they didn't ask me for a card when I checked in, and they're going to charge that card automatically. So I'm not running into it as much, but I can definitely see where that's a problem. And there are a lot of travel companies out there right now, like GrassPay, where we're doing some really cool things right now, especially like in meeting and group settings, where cards are being accepted, and they're actually sending letters out to the hotel with the card information in advance of the traveler arriving. So there's some great things happening, but again, all the things you're bringing up are still things that are happening, but I think our hope is that they're going to be minimized, and the majority will be able to travel, freely with their virtual cards.
So I'm going to jump in for a half a second. We hear a lot about tokens now, right? So we got the stable coin coming in the US. Google announced yesterday they're in the new way of getting you what you need for your hotel contracts directly, right, on the Google world. Uber announced their new marketplace to book corporate travel. So this isn't going to change. And everybody's planning on using a token eventually, right? The new OTAs are going to use that. So we're going to leapfrog. My thought is in some areas, EY is already doing it. Some of the bigger companies are doing it directly. You mentioned Hilton is a preferred partner. If you have a relationship with Hilton and or with Winding Tree and Winding Tree is Litecoin, boom, can you use the blockchain to do that? So what do you guys think about that? Are we going to skip some of this and just go directly to that? To your point, Megan, maybe never need a card. You'll be able to pull the money right out of your company's checking account and never worry if they have a smartphone.
I think it requires a lot of technology investment on the vendor side. You know, from a corporate side, it's brilliant. I mean, it's kind of nirvana, right? You understand exactly what it is. You've authorized it. You sent it out. The problem is hotel infrastructure leaves a lot to be desired. They have some catching up to do. No offense to anybody, they're huge systems. There's a ton of work that goes into upgrading that. It's just the nature of the beast. I have travelers that check into lodging facilities where they still take the plastic card, put it on that machine and swipe it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, to get the carbon copy thing back. It's still out there until there is a push, first of all, from the credit card companies, whether they're virtual or plastic, a push from those providers to upgrade the point of sale infrastructure. Until that happens, none of this can come to fruition. We have to have something that can talk to the network. And the reality is a lot of places, they just can't do that yet.
So you're saying on the supplier side, we'll be responsible for those leaps and bounds that we need to make if we're going to go faster. I love that. Yep. Thank you. That's very interesting. And Bernadette, from the supplier side, is that true? You're the guys responsible for slowing us down.
I think, well, I'm not, I think the big thing for us is like, we're working closely with MasterCard, Visa, TSYS, FIS, companies like that, right?
Those companies.
Capabilities, even just, or Plaid, pooling virtual card transactions with plastic transactions and commingling them so people can do their expenses. I think this is going to be a big movement that's going to, have to shift. So we would partner with like a Google or somebody that's switching over to, to that type of currency. But it's going to happen, Susan. You're right. It's inevitable. I mean, as fast as group virtual cards are growing, this is going to be the next horizon. Right. And I think the suppliers are always, like Megan said, like hotels, like their franchises, they're acquired. So it just takes them a lot longer, but they're going to be the newer companies, I think, if you will, that are going to establish the rules in the marketplace, and people are going to shift to it.
Awesome.
Okay. So we have a little bit, about 7 minutes left, and we have a couple questions. So I'm going to try to give you a few. We'll try to do 2 before we run out of time here. Okay, so we have this question from Vaishnavi. How mature is the virtual card solution in markets like Africa and East Asia? And second question is, how easy is it to integrate the data feed into expense report? Lastly, is it possible to integrate AML CFT checks to ensure that that one-time visitor meeting attendee for whom the virtual card is being used is not on the blacklist? That was like 3 questions in one. If you want me to read.
That was a really long question.
I don't know. That's going to take up the rest of the call. I'm going to start with the one I'm most proud of. So we actually have developed automated sanctions because we have a number of financial issuer partners, and one of them came to us and asked us, could you develop a sanctions process? So we actually have a sanctions process that we've automated. So the first time that someone receives a virtual, or they're about to receive a virtual card, they do have to provide the proprietary information like the date of birth. So it automatically in the system quickly checks to see if they're on the watch list. And we're really proud of that. And I don't know that everybody thinks it's necessary. I'm always like, oh shit, it's gonna slow people down for like 1 second. They might be annoyed, but it's the same as if you apply for plastic, you have to give your date of birth and things. So, but we do have an automated sanctions process. So that question I could answer. As far as outside of the US with virtual cards, I have to say, the other question you asked about was data feed. So as long as the transaction's being captured, then it can be CSV file, or it can be ported directly into like Expensify or Concur or wherever, whatever you're using, NetSuite. But as far as my knowledge of East Asia and China, I have to say that I would have to profess that I'm not an expert in that particular area, and I didn't study that before this call. So I would like to have that as a takeaway, and I'll come back to it.
Come back to us and we'll post the answer. Absolutely.
And Africa,
we will.
I think he said.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then there's a question about security, right?
Yeah.
So Megan, you're the leader of a corporate buyer program. how secure do you feel with things like virtual and the future blockchain, which is supposed to be the most secure way to do anything, right, in the world? Which way do you think we're going to get more secure, and how secure do you feel about the multiple channels you can use?
So I do think that a virtual card is always more secure than a plastic card, provided you have locked it down properly. So in the old days, we used to issue ghost cards, right? Everybody had a ghost card for the airfare with their travel program. And everybody thought they were very secure. But the reality is it's just a plastic card without the plastic.
Right.
And as you start using it, a million people have that number, and anybody with that number can use it just like any other card. V cards today aren't the same. I can issue a V card and I can say I only want it to be used for Bob Traveler at this hotel over these dates up to this transaction amount, and he's not allowed to charge his incidentals to it. And it works. And it works pretty well as long as the hotel is online and understands what to do with it. Again, training with the staffing turnovers over the last couple of years have made that really hard in a lot of properties, but hotels that are invested in understand the importance, are willing to do it. So the cards can be very, very secure. I'm going to have to let Bernadette talk about the virtual wallet cards because we don't do those. Like I said, my guys don't carry smartphones in many cases. Okay. But generally speaking, if you can properly set up your cards, then they're very secure. The data flows smoothly. Reconciliation gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot to add. It just represents greater control and reduced fraud. You can immediately deactivate a card. I think what it's done is replaced a lot of like the department card use, where everybody in the department's using this one card and it's out in the universe. So what we recommend and what we see with our customers is that they create a unique virtual card within seconds on file for that one specific vendor. So if they have 200 suppliers, there's 200 cards with the suppliers. If there's fraud that does occur, because it does still occur, you can just lock down that one card, but you don't have to go out and inform the other 200 people that here's our purchasing card again, because they all have unique cards on file. And then with it, I think we talked about the stranded traveler as well. So I think, to us, we think it represents greater control in the marketplace.
Thank you. So Carolyn, if I'm hearing correctly, and I see all these comments, really the comments are all about, hey, I want to do this for part of my program, at least to your point, Megan, but the hotels won't let me. So, you see them partnering with highly technical companies like Google and Grasp and all those great companies out there that are doing it. Mm-hmm. I think Megan made a great point. Suppliers, we need you to hurry up, get a little more on board, and so that we can take advantage of innovation and disruption in our programs. Because as travel leaders, we don't want 10 different paths to go down. We want one that's easy and a great experience for our travelers. And Bernadette, I hear your company and other companies like yours are looking for those suppliers to get a little more advanced so that you could spread your love a little further and make it happen a little sooner. Carolyn, what do you think? And thank you so much. What do you think, Carolyn?
I think that I agree with you on that. I wanted to say this earlier, but I do have some concern around just our current environment in terms of the human resources at the hotel. So what we're talking about, the suppliers on the side and having difficulty at the front desk, since the pandemic, I would imagine it's probably gotten worse, meaning they're not as educated or not, the front desk people have left, they've rehired new people, they're new to their hotel perhaps, so I think it's even more challenging because the point of sale is when they go to check in is the breakdown, right? And that's the worst part because it's the employee, AKA the client, right? Trying to check in and make it smooth. And then the hotel just doesn't know. If they knew how to do it, that would be great. So I don't know if it's a training, or if there's more additional training that needs to be done due to the pandemic and this 2-year break that we've taken, that we have trained the desk staff up. Now we always say that if we were building a program and I was doing a workflow, I would train the front desk of whatever hotel we were using anyways. But if you're just using it, this is general, like I want to put in my program and everyone is going to use these cards, then yes, you have to be assured that the suppliers you're using are able to take the card. Otherwise, you're going to be very embarrassed when you launch it.
Yeah. I mean, so I think a lot of what I've experienced, because I honestly started working here and I'm like, is this going to work? But it does. And so I think a lot of times at the hotel, it's like if you're creating, like the travel management companies are working with like another provider, and it's a unique virtual card per traveler, and it's the card that they're using for the guarantee, and it's the card they're using to settle, and it's the card that's on file for the hotel. I think that more often than not, it's working. But to your point, you're still going to have those hotels like Megan's people are staying at that this just isn't going to work. But I do think that again, this is the direction we're heading in. These are, hotels where they're starting to take tap and pay, or they're going to take the card number, or they're going to just charge it to the card number on file before you've even checked out, which is usually what I've seen happen to me, whether I wanted it on the card I used as the guarantee or not. They've already charged it that morning before I've left. I couldn't even change it if I wanted to. So I don't know if it's really that much of an issue, but it'll be interesting to see. We should have a part 2.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. Let's sign you guys up right now for part 2. I love that. All right, Carolyn, I'll let you take us out.
Yeah, so we ran out of time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Had a great time talking about this topic, and I really appreciate and want to thank Bernadette and Megan for joining us today and being our guest speakers. Thank you. And Susan, my co-host, we've been doing these face-offs. This is our 3rd one. We're having a great time. Look forward to seeing you in the future on some future face-off events. We're not announcing a new date yet. We're going to keep it a secret, so you'll find out soon. But get excited. It's going to be fun. We have more topics like this that really debunk things. And if we need to follow up on payments or something, we'll do that later. We'll do another payment one. No big deal. And we will respond to all your questions. So I appreciate you all putting them in the chat and putting them into the group as well. Thank you guys, and have a great day.
I love this. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. I was just going to say, if we can see what the questions are, I'm happy to follow up with people if it's related to payments. Megan and I can get together next week and go through the questions if you want.
Yep, absolutely. I'll get these for you. We recorded the session, so we have them all. We also did this on YouTube Live. For anybody who's on this and wants to share it with somebody, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can share it with everybody because it's on right now. So if you missed it and you want to watch it later, you can share it with your friends and just tell them to go there. And if you subscribe to the channel, then other face-off events will come up and you'll get them in YouTube. Susan and I will continue to put them on LinkedIn where you'll see us in social media. And certainly feel free to reach out to either myself, Susan, if you have any questions about face-off or would like to speak or be part of this. We'd love to hear from you. Sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You
guys
were awesome.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Megan. Thanks, Bernadette.
Thanks, everybody.